Hi, I'm Ariel. You're watching She Wants Addiction, and today I'm going to be sharing with you my favorite books that I've read so far this year. So, out of the 58 books that I've read so far this year, I chose 8 that I went back and looked through all of the titles and the pictures and chose out the ones that I feel were the most memorable to me so far. So, even if I rated a book highly, say 4 to 5 stars at the time that I read it, if I looked at the picture and didn't feel like I still could remember anything from the book or like felt really positively about it as compared to the other books, I didn't put it on this list. So let's go ahead and go through these, starting with the most recent. The most recent book that I read that I really enjoyed was Post Traumatic by Chantal V. Johnson. And this is a debut novel. It just came out, I believe, a few months ago. I heard it wrecked on the podcast Food for Thought, which if you guys watch my videos, you know that I love that podcast and everyone on it. And so I take their book recommendations unequivocally. I don't question it. Like, if they tell me a book is good, then like I'm on that shit. But so anyways, I loved this book, and I loved it so much that I did, like, I don't want to say an exact recreation of the cover, because I did change some things about it, but I decided to kind of like, you know, recreate the cover with myself as the main character. And oh my God, you guys, the main character of this is, to me, so relatable. Like, Vivian, oh my God, like, me and her are like soulmates, you know what I mean? Like, so many similarities. But anyway, so she's an Afro-Latina who is a lawyer and is trying, obviously I'm not a lawyer, but she's trying to navigate working at this, like, she basically defends mental health patients and deals with the racism in the mental health system, and then also is dealing with the toxic family system that she kind of grew up with and trying to like navigate her life. And she has a best friend named Jane, who is like one of the few people that understands her, and they have this like repartee where they sort of talk back and forth with each other. And you know, she goes to this family reunion and some shit goes down and she has like a fight with her friend, and it's just, I loved it so much. I do think the pacing at times was a little slow, but the humor in here, it is so darkly humorous. And I think if you like dark humor and bitchy main characters, you will really, really enjoy this. Especially just like the commentary on racism. Like, it's so good. Like, she is so just like witty and sharp-tongued and fallible. And oh my God, I can't say enough. Like, I love books where like there's a messy female protagonist, but I didn't feel like I saw like a messy black girl protagonist that I really related to until I found Vivian, and just her rant that she goes on during the dinner party. Like, you guys, you have to read this. It was everything I wanted the book Assembly to be, but was not. You know, like, this was a much better executed version of it, and I cannot wait to read literally anything else she puts out. And I also watched the author interviews and like adored it. Adored her, adored the vibes, adored the energy. Like, she's just so awkward. Like, it is so freaking relatable for me. I'm also going to say, if you were triggered by eating disorders, specifically like anorexia, I guess, I don't think it's anorexia, it's more like orthorexia, where she's obsessed with like dieting, being healthy, remaining thin. Also a little bit of like starving herself, I feel like. And I feel like there's not enough orthorexia shown in books, just because it's so fairly new and kind of unknown. But I feel like I have mildly struggled with that, like with over-exercising and, you know, like being obsessed with eating healthy and stuff like that. So that was really refreshing and relatable to see in a book. Obviously not good behavior to mimic or whatever, but just the representation of it being in a book and it seeming like genuinely written, not just somebody like trying to throw representation in there. That was really cool to see that reflected. Okay, the next book I want to talk about is one that I already mentioned in a video, so I'll link that here if you're interested. But it is called Inside Out. It's by Joseph Osmundson, who is one of the people on the Food for Thought podcast that I was talking about. But anyway, so he's a sad boy. He's essentially a sad bisexual man. And this book is kind of like short vignettes, sort of poetry-esque, that talk about an abusive relationship. Well, I don't necessarily want to say abusive, but it was definitely emotionally abusive and like toxic, like a toxic relationship, okay? So a toxic relationship that he was in, and it's just very poetic, very heartbreaking, very relatable in its own way, because it's like these two people that are trying to make it work and like trying to connect with each other, but their different traumas that they bring to the table make it so that they're unable to do so. And so yeah, so if you like really, really sad poetry, and some of the stuff that he just like admits in this book is, it's a little wild, it's a little honest. Like, if you like very confessional type experimental poetry books, like example I can think of would be literally Show Me a Healthy Person, which I mention all the time, but I feel like this is very sort of similar in tone to that, where it's like, oh, that's oversharing a little bit, but like I respect the honesty, you know, and like it's so real. So if that sounds like something you'd be into, definitely check this one out. So the next book I want to talk about is by Charles Bukowski, and I know as soon as I mention that name, you know where you fall. It's either you love it or you hate it for the most part. And I am a stan, although I can mention that some of his work is definitely much better as compared to others. I definitely prefer his poetry to his prose, although I am glad that I'm reading his books because they're highly autobiographical and have really given me insight into his life and sort of the things that he went through and how he got the perspective that he did. So this book was Sifting Through the Madness for the Word, the Line, the Way. And I really enjoyed this one. I felt like almost all of the poems were really good. I've read several of his poetry collections, and I was under the impression that the later you got in his kind of catalog, the worse his poetry got. But I found that that's not necessarily true because this was written super, super later in his life, I believe. And so this is at the point where he had gotten really, really good at his craft. And I feel like every single one just hit the tones that he wanted it to hit. And whenever I think of this book, I just think of the phrase, the hell of myself, which is one of my favorite phrases ever. Like that sticks with me so much. Like the John Keats, the unpromising morning of my life. I love that phrase. Like there are certain phrases out of here that just stick with me so much. So if you're into Bukowski or just super readable poetry, I would recommend checking this book out. Okay, the next book I want to talk about is We Are Owed, and this is a poetry book by Ariana Brown. I will be honest, I can't remember a whole lot of the specifics of this book, but I do remember really, really enjoying it, and that the poetry was really, really skilled. And there was this particular series that she wrote about an explorer in, I don't remember what country, one of the countries that she was from, I believe, originally. Like the author of this book is Afro-Latina. And so there was a series of poems she wrote about like basically how much this person inspired her that I thought was really moving and really good. And she also talked about going to visit like her homeland and the way that the other Latino people that were there kind of made her feel like an outcast with like their comments and their remarks and kind of their microaggressions and stuff like that. Although I'm not Latino myself, I did find that super relatable as somebody who's half this and half that, and how you get alienated by both sides. And so I just really, really felt that, like she was getting the microaggressions from the white people, and then like the, oh, you don't speak Spanish from, the Latino people. So it was just kind of, I just related to that feeling all too hard. And then what's also interesting about this poetry collection is that she doesn't cater to like the white gaze or whatever. Like she does write a lot of the poems in Spanish, and you're just forced to kind of like look stuff up or figure out what it means. It's pretty easy to like look the stuff up. Like you're not going to be totally lost, but I do feel like there are a couple poems that were just totally in Spanish that I was like, okay, I kind of have no idea what's going on here, but it's not for me. You know what I mean? Like it is for a Spanish speaking person. And so I thought that was really cool that she did that. And again, I can't remember a ton of the specifics, but I just felt like overall it was a really well-crafted collection. Her series in particular were great. Okay, the next book I want to talk about is Iris Apfel's autobiography, and this was highly, highly picture-based. And I picked it up because she is considered kind of the ambassador of having an eclectic style, which is kind of where, you have no style, but you just kind of pick and choose things that you like from all different categories of style. And that's kind of how I feel like fashion-wise that I fit. She's known for like the chunky jewelry and the really large glasses and the makeup and everything. And I watched the documentary on her like right after finishing this book. So that was like a great combination. And she's just such a character. It kind of shows that you can get older and not become this like boring, bitchy type of person. Like I feel like there's this stereotype of an old person that you have to like become stagnant and whatever. And she just seems really cool. Like she's traveled everywhere. She has all kinds of amazing stories to tell. Like you can just tell the spark of life is like still very alive in her. And the subtitle of this is Accidental Icon. So she didn't even mean to really become an icon. Like this was just something that she liked to do, was travel and collect and, do all this designing and stuff like that. And she just became like an international sensation. So love her, love the vibe. So the next one I want to talk about is called Girl in Landscape by Jonathan Lethem. And this I stumbled upon because YouTube recommended me a video of Adam Savage's favorite science fiction books, and I just watched it out of curiosity, and this one sounded interesting to me. So I listened to it on audio. I remember the narrator was very good, and this is just a strange, odd story, and it's a coming of age of a young girl. Her family is going to be moving into space to colonize this new planet, and that's kind of the setup. And I'll just read a little bit from the review that I wrote. The narrator is spectacular and does different voices that bring something to each character, and the writing compelled me to keep going in order to understand this strange world full of grief, household deer, arch builders, and disagreeable humans. I loved the protagonist, Pella, who sees through so much of the adults' bullshit, but is also quite fickle herself. The sexually charged scene between Ephraim and Pella and her conversation with Neil towards the end were some of my favorites. I do feel like a major theme in this is not only her coming of age, but then like sort of her sexual awakening and the sexual attraction that she has to this older man, that's Ephraim. Also, just the themes of grief within this book were so poignant that it was just amazing. And having also, you know, right after this, I read a book that was kind of Jonathan Lethem just talking about different parts of his life, like a memoir. And I learned that just like the protagonist of this book, his mother had passed away from cancer super, super young, which I feel like is why those themes were so real. Like this was a defining moment of kind of his childhood, and the way that he was able to write it, I felt like was just really insightful. And one of my favorite lines from this book that I just think about all the time: but perhaps those departed only seem greater to us because they are gone. Deep shit. Okay, the next one I want to talk about is this kid's picture book, and it is by Langston Hughes and Charles R. Smith Jr., who took the photographs. And so the poem obviously is Langston Hughes, and then we have the photos. I guess this won the Coretta Scott King Award, and I can see why. This was a perfect 5 stars for me. I have started looking into more like black picture books, and it's been really enjoyable for me to just pick them up in the store whenever I see them and sort of page through them. And just, first of all, the photography in this is amazing, and then obviously Langston Hughes is amazing. So combine the two, and it's just beautiful. Like, look at that. Like, there are so many good pictures in here. Like, look at the light. I don't know if you can see it because of the glare, but look at the light in this girl's hair shining off the jewels. Like, I feel like the contrast in this book and the sepia tones, so nice. The final book I have to talk about is called Ask Me About My Uterus, A Quest to Make Doctors Believe in Women's Pain. And this is by Abby Norman. Again, I listened to this on audio, and it was fairly long. But the reason that I ended up listening to this is because I bought this for one of my friends as a Christmas gift, and then I don't like buying things that I haven't already read. And I wanted to read this anyway, like it's been on my list. So I went ahead and listened to it, I think like in January. Like this is one of the first really good books that I listened to in the year. And if you identify as a woman or as non-binary, I'm sure you understand the difficulty of going into the doctors and, you know, not being believed or not helped, or, you know, even chronic illness not being taken seriously. And so this book kind of explores that. One thing I will say, and this is from my review, is I didn't expect this book to go so deep into abuse, but I'm really glad it did. Emotional and physical neglect are so hard to put a finger on, but the way she described it made me feel so much less alone in my own childhood. I almost can't believe there's someone out there who had to grow up even faster than I did, with her being emancipated so young. So she gets emancipated from her mom, who struggles with an eating disorder, and then she kind of talks about how that genetically got passed down to her because she ends up trying to like make herself throw up at one point and realizing that it makes her feel good, and then realizing, oh, I got that from my mom, you know, like, so if you're triggered by eating disorders, like any type of stuff related to that, don't listen to this book. Or like emetophobia, also avoid this book. Her audio narration for some reason reminded me of the YouTuber Best Dressed, who I don't think posts anymore, but if you guys know who that is, like her personality and stuff like really reminded me of her. And I really liked how the book intertwined like her research, all the research she was having to do on her own, with also then like this personal memoir sort of story of how she grew up. And I just really like when memoir and nonfiction sort of combine like that, like it's a personal take on a certain subject. I said the only thing I didn't really like about this book is she tended to ramble on too long, especially towards the end, and referred to having sex for the first time as losing her virginity, which was just a strange choice of words since she seemed so feminist in other respects. I was also quite curious about her autistic brother, who was only briefly mentioned. So yeah, again, I read this super early in the year, so I can't recall a lot of it, but if you have the experience of not being listened to at the doctors, or you know someone who has, or you know somebody who struggles with like a reproductive illness, say PMDD, or endometriosis, or any of those type of things, I think this would be a really, really good book for them, or for you to educate yourself on it. So I'm going to call that the best books I have read so far this year. Tell me if you've read these, what you think of these, what your favorite books of the year have been so far, any books you think I should check out. Yeah, just let me know. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you in my next video. Peace.